I'd like to talk to you this morning about a subject that I find is very confusing to a lot of people, and it's because of the paintings and views that have been taught for years, and that is the subject of baptism. Exactly what is baptism? Some people, when they think of the baptism in the Bible, they will go to the U.S. or American English Dictionary and look up the word. When they do, they will find a definition of baptism. Baptism says there that it can be either sprinkling, pouring, or immersion. But I would tell you this, that is not a Bible definition of the word. It's a word that is the meaning today, but it's not the meaning that the Bible used when it used the Greek word for baptism. The Greek word for baptism was baptizo. It is translated, and anyone that knows the Greek would tell you that it's translated to immerse, to plunge, or to dip. Basically, to cover up. That's what it meant. Some will say and try to say that in the New Testament, that is what they practice. I've even saw the painting. A lot of family Bibles have a picture of Jesus down in the water about knee deep or ankle deep with John the Baptist and him having a seashell and pouring over Jesus and saying, now this is the baptism of Jesus. But that is not the case. We can look at the word. I think it's interesting in John 3 and 23. There in John 23 and 23, it says that there that John was down there baptizing, and then the second part of that verse it says, because there was much water there. If all you did was sprinkle out of a bowl, you could take one bowl of water and baptize thousands of people. But the baptism was something that they was doing when they was dipping or plunging them into the water. Matter of fact, if you look up into the Catholic Encyclopedia, a very good religious encyclopedia, but they even tell you in that, when you look up baptism, they would say that the ancient form of baptism was immersion. They did not really start doing anything but immersion for the first 400 years. And it was 1,000 years after the time of Christ, almost 1,000 years before finally they decided that they would do away with the option of being immersed and just sprinkled, because that was the only way they was going to practice what they called baptism. In the earlier English Bibles, in the Bishop Bibles and others that was done before the King James, matter of fact, they always said that it was immersed. It's funny, if you read those older versions, it says John the Immerser. John was not even called the Baptist. It was John the Immerser is what he was. John the Immerser, who baptized because there was much water there. We understand that that's the mode of baptism. Sprinkling and pouring is something that man invented. It's not something that's from God. And if we are going to practice a scripture and biblical baptism, it must be that type of covering up, totally surrendered by that. You know, it's like all of us, we want to be buried with Christ. In Romans 6, there it says that we are buried with Christ. Romans 6, 3 and 4. We are planted together in his likeness, buried with him. We are buried with Christ. You don't bury something by sprinkling, but you cover it up. So we are buried with Christ. This is the important thing to remember about baptism. And somebody said, well, what does it matter? Well, I tell you what it matters. It matters because God told us what baptism was. We know to realize what baptism is. Baptism is a immersion. If you was not immersed and they told you that you was baptized, then I'm sorry, you was not baptized in a biblical way. You was not baptized in a way that was recognized of being baptized in the first century. Baptism was immersion, the ancient form of baptism. I tried to practice first century Christianity. I believe the Bible is written in the first century, but I believe the Bible is for every century. The Bible is for the century we live in. It is going to be for the century that our children, our grandchildren live in, our great-grandchildren, because the Bible is something that is forever. We are not to add to or take away from the prophecy of this book. So I plead with you to look at baptism, study baptism. Next week, we will talk about just basically what is baptism for and what does it do, as we continue this thought next week on baptism. If you have any questions, write, call me, whatever way that you can get in contact with me, do it, because we would love to hear from you. And God be with you till we meet again.